Back to any of y'all who have been on our webinars. Happy to have you here and welcome to any of our newbies. For those that you have been here, this is the spiel that you've heard every single time. Tom, marvelous teacher, love to have him here, great insights. He is also very happy to answer questions on the fly. So as we're going through the slides and Tom is giving his presentation, please feel free to post your questions in the chat. And what I will do is I'll monitor and if it makes sense, politely interrupt so that we can get an answer in real time. If it does not, we will make sure that we hold the questions till the end. And whether or not we answer live on the call or follow up with you after, we'll make sure your questions get answered. That also being said, is the chat should be open for everyone. So if you guys want to post who you are, where you're dialing in from, would be great to just know since these webinars tend to be kind of anonymous for, the viewers in the background. We like to know that there's real humans on the other side. Um, but with that, I will stop blabbering and hand it over to Tom for some great insights.
Yeah, thank you, Danielle. Appreciate everybody joining the webinar today. As you can see on the screen, the topic is holiday shutdown. What I hope to do in the next 45 minutes to an hour is just give you some thoughts, ideas, some nuggets, some things to consider if you're in the field all the time looking for strategies to save money and knowing that you have some shutdown potential coming up in the next few months. I just wanted to talk through some of my experiences. If you've joined us in the past, many times we start these webinars by trying to get to know the audience a little bit. So Danielle, if you could pop up the poll. But what I'm always interested in knowing is who's in the webinar today. Is it a bunch of people starting out looking for some fresh ideas, or some professionals that have been seasoned, people that have been around the block a few times and just looking for that nugget that might take their efforts to the next level?
Sorry, that took me a second, but there it is, y'all.
Yeah, thank you. So let me just give you a few seconds here to respond to the poll.
Yeah, and Tom,
And
while
maybe
that's going, oh,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, while that's going on, I was just going to call out some of the folks that have introduced themselves. We've got Julie from WECDSB, Tammy from Oklahoma State University, Travis from Wayne State College, Amber from University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, Jennifer from Central Point School District, Oregon, Brandon from Fort Worth, Eagle Mountains, I don't know how to say that word, ISD. David from Carnegie Mellon University are just some of the few. So thank y'all for being here. And it looks like we got some poll results that I'll hand back over to Tom.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for that, Daniela. Yeah, so the results, it seems as though we have many people on the call that have actually been doing this for quite a few years. So hopefully I can meet your needs and give you a few things to think about, as well as help the people that are just starting to begin to build better shutdowns. For those of you that I haven't met yet, and let's see the results here. Okay, so you can see the results. And let's see. We can click to the next slide here. As I was saying, for those of you that I haven't met yet, a little bit about me. I go by Tom, even though you might see on my screen, my name is Thomas. But I've worked for 20 years in the energy industry, and I've worked in more than 250 locations around the country. The theme of my work has always been consulting and helping organizations look at their culture and look at strategies to save energy and to focus on energy conservation. And I'm just such a strong proponent of that. I just passionate about it. I want to share those ideas because I feel for many organizations with some effort and some focus, there's great opportunities to save and not have to spend a lot of money in doing so. The other thing, just so you know, is I'm working for Energy Cap, as you can see on the screen. And if you're unfamiliar with who we are, is we are a software company. We track people's utility bills, so we have different modules within our software to help people do their analytics. For the agenda today, what I wanted to do is start with a disclaimer. Want to make sure that we're all in sync with where I think this fits in all of our responsibilities, and then work through these 5 different steps that you have here. And just summarizing them quickly, you just have to put together a plan. You got to energize your team. You got to work very methodically to plan these shutdowns. Got to get out there in the field, and then you got to start to measure some stuff. So that's saying it in a nutshell, but I want to unpack all of those ideas and talk about them in depth, give you some examples, and hopefully help you avoid some of the landmines that might be out there as you try to navigate through this. So starting with the disclaimer. I want to say right up front that the recommendations, the suggestions I have today are not a one size fits all. I recognize every organization is unique. It has different savings opportunities as well as different challenges to capture those savings. There's different politics, there's different building shapes and sizes, different mechanical systems. All of that has to be considered as you plan these shutdowns. And so the recommendations in this webinar should be vetted and carefully considered before being implemented. That being said, I think a lot of what I have to offer can go across organizations in different building types, but just listen to it carefully. Maybe at times listen to the spirit, what I'm offering, and translate it into your world so that you can get the maximum benefit from it. So here we are, starting the month of October and knowing that the calendar is flipping and the holiday season's around the corner. And I realize different organizations maybe celebrate different holidays, and there are different religious groups that celebrate different things at different times of the year. And so we recognize there's a lot of complexity and a lot of differences across who we are as human beings and organizations. But typically, as we near year's end, there's opportunities to look at the calendar and look for opportunities to save, where you might be able to turn buildings off or shut things down or manage things more aggressively because of operational differences, because there's less occupancy or things happening. And so my advice number one is consult the calendar. Before planning anything or putting any wheels in motion, look at the calendar, think about the dates that might be advantageous to plan around, and begin to build your plan with the calendar in mind. So step number one, and usually the foundation of any effort when you're trying to do energy conservation, is you got to build a team and you got to build a playbook. You have to come together and come up with a strategy for how you're going to go about making these improvements. So the objective is to establish leadership, ownership, and accountability by engaging everybody that needs to be there. And most importantly, most energy conservation efforts struggle to get started if you don't engage an executive sponsor. Somebody has to have a title that gets involved, whether it's a CEO, the CFO, somebody of great influence in an organization. I even jokingly say here, somebody who might sign the checks. When this person gets involved, it brings credibility to the whole effort. And so if you are in charge, if you're that energy manager and you're wanting to begin to make change, you're new in the role, you have to get these executive sponsors involved. Their credibility, as they say, is just so important to getting others involved. A second group of people that's really important is the facilities and ops lead team. So if you have a director, a leader, or a bunch of leaders, a bunch of managers on your team, you have to get them involved because these are the people that are going to know how to operate the buildings in the most effective and efficient way. You need their input. They definitely need to be intimately involved with the decision-making process because they're going to have opinions and they're going to be concerned about certain things that might not be on the radar of others. So make sure you're involving that executive sponsor, the facilities team. The next person on the list would be the IT director. The IT director, if you're going to ask to do things different in your organization, such as shutting down computers or managing printers or other technological devices, other technology different, the IT director and likely the whole IT team is going to have very strong opinions about the right way to do this. And I'd also offer many times, I can say this because of my experience, this group of people many times is a little bit hesitant to get actively engaged because they worry about things going wrong. So they definitely need to have a seat at the table to be part of those conversations right from the onset. So if we're going to propose managing things more aggressively, possibly turning things off or setting things back, they need to be part of those conversations so they can weigh in and express their concerns. And the last bullet here is really you need to have representation from every department. If your organization has a kitchen staff or athletic staff or a research staff, all people need to be represented. And maybe one person can wear multiple hats to represent different groups because you want to try to manage the size of this group of people. It works best if you don't have more than 10 or 12 people in a room to have this conversation. If you get 20 people in the room, it's very difficult to get people to agree. So try to strike the balance between getting the people there that need to be there to be part of the conversation and not having so many people that the conversations stall. So now that you're together, now you got to start to talk about the opportunities or ways to reduce energy consumption. So you have to look at everything, in my opinion. You can't just immediately write anything off the table. And the number one item for most organizations is thinking about the HVAC. Controlling the HVAC is nearly every time going to be the single biggest benefit to plan around during a shutdown. One of the little taglines I use, or one of the things that I say to people quite frequently, is when you're planning, you need to know who is where and when. Let me just repeat that for emphasis. You need to know who is where and when. You have to answer that question during any period of time that you're hoping to shut down or behave differently, operate in a different way, because by knowing who is where and when, it allows you to plan the HVAC and make sure people have what they need. It's never the intention of an energy conservation effort to take stuff away from people. It's simply to minimize the use of energy when people aren't around and there's no benefit by leaving things running. So discuss opportunities around HVAC. Look at the IT stuff, and we'll unpack that more throughout the webinar. Look at lighting in kitchens. Look at all the things that use energy in your organization and consider, can they be managed a little different for 2 days, 4 days, 10 days if you have a chance to shut down, and see if there's opportunities that you could pursue. It's important when these people come together that you discuss the concerns, the risks, and the resources. And I want to stay on resources here for a second. Because organizations are different and they have a different number of employees and different number of resources available to them, sometimes one organization can plan to do one thing, and because they have the resources to execute it, they can do it successfully, where the next organization simply doesn't have the people. Let me just give you a for instance. Let's suppose you have buildings that are controlled by programmable thermostats, and those buildings are spread out geographically over a county. Well, yes, there would be a benefit to reprogramming those thermostats over a shutdown period of time. But if you don't have somebody that can drive between the buildings and reprogram those thermostats, that's hard to execute. By contrast, the next organization might have a bunch of people, and sending people out or putting people in the field to do some small things might have a big impact. So make sure you talk about the concerns, the risks, the resources, and put together a plan that makes sense. Another big part of planning is identifying the building targets. You don't just necessarily want to go after all buildings. Maybe you have some high value targets. You have buildings that use an awful lot of energy relative to the others. And those are the buildings you know that are going to have substantially less occupancy or greater opportunities to control. So think through the targets. And if you're an energy cap user, you might run some reports, do some analysis of your buildings using the tool, and it might pop out some buildings that might become high value targets. The fourth bullet here, learn about control options in the buildings. Most organizations do not have a single control system that is able to control all of their buildings. And what I'm speaking of is a building automation system. Usually, a bigger organization will have multiple control systems. And I'll throw out a couple names like Siemens or Schneider Electric or Johnson Control. You have these systems that control the buildings. And some organizations have those, and they have many, many more. And sometimes it's manual control options. So there are programmable thermostats, or there's pneumatic clocks that might still exist in buildings. There's all sorts of different things that are out there controlling our buildings. What you need to do is learn about your buildings and identify the ones that are going to be the easiest to control based on your resources. So don't go after them all if this is new. If you've been doing this for 5 years, chances are you understand all those things and you can be more aggressive. But if you're new, pick your targets carefully and pick the easy ones, because what you want to do, if this is your first experience, is you want it to be successful. This fifth bulleted point here is, I think, really important, is you have to create contingency plans. So setting the stage again, you get a bunch of people in a room, you're talking about these things, and inevitably somebody's going to say, well, what happens if it gets really cold? Or what happens if we have a hurricane or some type of unexpected event? And those things do happen. You do have these unexpected things. And so you have to anticipate it and try to come up with some contingency plans. In the north, usually it's really cold weather. You go into a holiday season, you think the weather might be mild, and all of a sudden the weather changes, and now there's more risk of freezing that might occur in a building. In the south, many times it's humidity, where you might have rain or fog or just periods of just really humid weather, and it puts buildings more at risk. So as part of this conversation in the beginning, talk about that openly. You need your facility folks to weigh in on that, express their concerns, talk about how they've managed these things in the past. But don't be caught off guard by these things, because it's huge. It's huge to your overall success in planning these shutdowns. A few other things that I'd consider in this first step as you're planning. is I'd encourage you to try to quantify the financial benefits. Take a look at how much you're spending in your buildings. And I could estimate that many organizations, if you're able to shut down for a significant number of days around the holidays, suppose you're able to shut down between the Christmas holiday and the New Year's holiday. So you're able to be off for 10 days, let's just say. Usually that translates to a 10, 20, 30% savings that could occur in a building. And obviously, it's difficult to forecast that without knowing more of the specifics, but the numbers can get pretty eye-popping. Look at your buildings, look at your bills, begin to estimate, talk to some people, do some calculations. But this is something that's very motivating. Most people will get on board and really support an initiative if they see the benefit in doing that, particularly if the numbers get surprisingly large. And I would say for, again, the newbies in the room, you would be surprised how large these numbers can get as you start to do these calculations and look at the bills. So use this to your benefit. And also talk about the operational benefits. Most people agree that it's silly to operate buildings if nobody's present. So if there's vacant areas of buildings or entire buildings that aren't being utilized, most people get on board just because they think it's silly or it's a total waste. So you can get a lot of support in a hurry just by using logic and reasoning this out with people. Second bullet here is protecting sensitive equipment. Most organizations have IT equipment or sensitive research equipment that can't experience significant temperature or humidity changes. So you need to know where that is in your organization and make sure it's protected. And I would also say, if this is new, is don't go after that stuff early during doing shutdowns. So if this is your first one, your second one, leave that off to the side. Save the more complex things for later. You'll have a chance to save in a lot of different ways, but leave the harder stuff for later. Build momentum. I mentioned this a minute ago about the high humidity areas. And if you're in a part of the country where you experience a lot of high humidity, I want to encourage you to make sure you're getting some training and learning about moisture management. It's been a common experience for me as I've worked around the country. Many organizations don't have a clear understanding of the science of moisture management. And I certainly don't want to say, there's no understanding of it, but there's a limited understanding in general, and people are concerned and there's fear about things going wrong in a building. So as a safety net or an insurance plan, people run their buildings way more than they need to in human environments. And so to feel comfortable yourself making those decisions or making those recommendations, make sure you're getting the support and help you need in order to truly understand the science of moisture management. And use tools. I've got a picture of a tool here, a hobo logger, if you're unfamiliar with them. It's a simple device that can be placed out in the field. In this case here, it's measuring temperature and humidity, and it's going to measure it in increments of time, every 5 minutes, every 10 minutes, however you program it. But it's a great tool in order to measure what's happening in the field, in your buildings, as you build up towards a shutdown period of time, so you know exactly what the building is experiencing. And the last bullet, which I've hit a couple times already, is don't be too aggressive if this is new. Make sure your level of aggression, if you will, or your level of pursuit here matches your organization so that you can be successful. Now, as we get into step number 2, I want to start to talk about managing the buildings. And I want to go back to a core philosophical approach that started with our founder at Energy Cap, Steve Hines. Steve says this all the time to this day, and I've heard him say it many, many times through the years. And I just think it's a great way of looking at an approach or how you should go about buildings, managing your buildings. So he says this: if you can't turn it off, set it back. And if you can't set it back, tune it up. So let's unpack this for a second. What Steve is saying is, he says, the first place you should start is by looking to see if you can safely and reasonably turn off a device. If you can do that, you should probably take advantage of that, because when a device is turned off, it's using its minimal amount of energy. If you can't turn it off, then let's set it back. Let's change its temperature. Let's change, say, the lighting conditions. If you're talking about lights, let's set the lights back by maybe dimming them. Or let's change temperature flows or air flows. Let's make an adjustment to how it's operating in order to squeeze savings out of it. So if you can't turn it off and you can't adjust it, then what Steve is saying, let's tune it up. Let's make sure that you get in there and make sure that it's running as efficiently as it possibly can. And maybe this is something that's got to be on your list for improvement over time, where you get technicians in and things are adjusted or fine-tuned or improved or even replaced. but let's tune it up. If you recognize you've got something that cannot be turned off and it can't really be well managed, then let's make sure it's running as efficiently as possible. So step number two. So summarizing where we're at, just so you get a coherent thought here. So step number one is you got to get people together. You got to put together a plan. Step number two is now you got to identify and prioritize the energy reduction measures. So now you've got to decide what your targets are going to be and really commit to doing some action. And I mentioned this earlier, but we want to make sure that we're doing this without compromising safety or comfort or building integrity. So you never want that to be a consequence of these efforts. So in terms of HVAC, look at the set points. Take a look, first of all, how are you operating your buildings during occupied time? And for the sake of this conversation, I'm going to focus on the heating season, just so I'm not having to repeat numbers both for heating and cooling. But let's say your heating numbers where you're trying to heat during occupied time to 70 degrees. And if you have setbacks, you're setting back to 65 degrees. So your set points allow for the building to set back 5 degrees. What I'm suggesting is maybe during these periods of time is you want to stretch that out a little bit. Maybe rather than setting back to 65, maybe you want to set back to 60 or even 55. In working with organizations all across the country, hot weather, cold weather, places that were very severe, I can reassure you that many buildings can experience a 55-degree setback very comfortably and successfully. Now, would I say all? Certainly not. But this is where you got to do your homework. You got to learn your buildings. But if you're new and you're not quite sure what can be done, I want to reassure you again, 55 degrees is not off the table. Many buildings can very comfortably be set back 15 degrees. If they're sitting idle for 5 days or 7 days or 10 days, the temperature in the building can very gradually lower down to that 55 degrees and recover relatively quickly. So look at reducing your set points. Trim your ventilation. Suppose your organization is not able to totally shut down. There's still occupancy, but the occupancy is greatly reduced because people are home for the holidays. You might have the ability to reduce ventilation. You're no longer required to bring in the same amount of ventilation and the same amount of oxygen. CO2 levels would be very safe and reasonable if you reduce ventilation. Maybe this is the time where you reprogram your system. Put it in another mode so that it's just not ventilating quite to the same level. If you can, shut down zones. Try to put people maybe into one part of a building or be creative and take a look and see if you can actually turn off entire buildings or zones. So rooftop units, air handling units, power them down, shut them down, set them back. Again, depends upon the environment, but be aggressive when you can, when you know nobody's going to be in them. The second bullet, exhaust fans, both in the kitchen and bathroom. I want to talk about these because many people don't appreciate what exhaust fans are doing and the impact that they can have. I want to ask you to visualize a basketball. So you've got something, basketball size. A basketball represents about a cubic foot of air. Bathroom fans, even small bathroom fans, residential bathroom fans, might move 100, 200, 300 CFM a minute. What I'd like you to visualize is suppose you had 300 basketballs in a bathroom, even a residential bathroom at home. In 1 minute, those 300 basketballs are going to be sucked out of the room by the exhaust fan. So if you can picture having bigger bathrooms or bigger kitchens and bigger fans in the kitchens that are pushing out 500 basketballs worth of air or 1,000 basketballs worth of air, when that air gets pushed out of the building, air has to infiltrate back into the building to replace it. It's just the law of physics. The air has to replace. What people don't consider is when you turn that fan on, you're sucking air out of the building that might be already heated or already cooled. It's air that you probably want to keep. And now you're giving it away because the fan is exhausting it out of the building. So when you think about exhaust fans, I want you to think about two things. Exhaust fans, by turning them off, you save energy because the motor is no longer spinning. So you save literally energy by doing that. And you help protect the building by not removing air from it that's desirable. And the building now doesn't have to heat or cool new air coming into the building because you've sucked out all the good air from the building. So exhaust fans are huge when you're planning shutdowns. You need to understand where all of them are and they have a plan around all of them so that they're controlled in the way that makes sense. Switching gears to lighting. Interior lighting, Here's what I have seen through the years is many people nowadays have motion sensors in their building. So on the interior, they expect all the lights to go off because there are motion sensors. Well, there are many situations where the motion sensors have failed and the lights will stay on unless somebody takes action. And that's what I'm suggesting here is take a look at your interior lighting. And if you have situations where there are failures, try to solve that problem before people are going to be gone for 10 days. It's really a shame when a space might be lit for 10 days, 24 hours a day, just because there's a bad motion sensor. So try to track those down. And in the cases on the interior, when there are switches that can and should be flipped, make sure you put a plan around the people to turn those off. In terms of exterior lights, on the outside, many times there's chances during these shutdowns to do something different with outside lights. If your organization is one that, for the most part, there are people around the buildings nearly all the time during the evenings, and the lights have to be on typically Monday through Sunday, so all 7 days of the week. But during a shutdown, people are no longer around. It's like it's a ghost town. There just aren't people around. You might take a look at the outside lights and program them differently. Take advantage of the opportunities to either get them off for long periods through the night or even all night long where they don't even come on just because there's no risk in doing so. So don't discount it. Don't just accept that that's the way it is. Take a look and see if you can make it better.
Hey, Tom.
Yeah,
I don't know if it was an accident, but we've got Jacob who raised his hand.
yeah.
Jacob, if it wasn't an accident, you now have permission to talk if you want to unmute yourself to ask your question. Hello, are you there? I see you unmuted yourself.
Yes, my apologies. I must have accidentally hit that.
Oh, okay. Well, welcome and goodbye. We'll let Tom keep doing his thing.
Thanks. All right. So picking up where I left off. So the fourth thing in the list here is plug loads. So it's the computers, it's printers, it's personal devices. I'd mentioned 20 minutes ago when I was saying we got to get the IT people together. We got to get everybody together to talk. We started talking about computers and some of the concerns the IT department has about turning things off. Most of these devices, computers, printers, personal devices, the technology things around our building, most can be reasonably managed and turned off. And so the obstacle that most people need to overcome is just doing it for the first time. When I was in the field myself, what I would do is I'd coordinate pilots with my IT team. We would take certain computers or certain printers and we would turn them off in one building or one space, and then we'd power them up to see how they would respond. So I would not suggest, if this is new for you, that you just haphazardly just start turning stuff off and then try to turn it on and, hey, everything's going to be okay, because very likely it won't. You need to find out if you've got computers or printers that don't reboot and don't find the network, or they're older and there's problems. But you still need to go through that work. And I'm saying don't dismiss it. Put the effort in to understand what can be managed and then put a plan together for how to manage it so that it can be done effectively. One of the things that I've heard consistently from IT departments is they don't like turning computers off because they want to be able to manage the network. And certainly that's got to be a priority to make sure that all the computers in the network are talking and communicating and they have all their updates. But most computers require to be rebooted occasionally, at least, in order to process their updates. And what I would say is that should be part of the plan. Maybe what you want to do is you want to have computers do their updates upon shutdown rather than startup. Because the concern is if computers build up a number of updates over time, they're turned off and then they're turned on. Many times that computer might take several minutes to reboot when people are in a hurry. And so be creative, think out of the box, think about how things are utilized. Usually this begins to stimulate really good conversations between the energy management team and the IT team to find solutions that make sense for the organization. And hopefully planning for a shutdown like this can be the impetus for planning to see savings even more regularly. So take advantage of that. Again, get people around the table and have those conversations. Next item here is refrigeration, kitchen devices. If you're going to be off for a series of days, I think this has got to be on the table. Maybe you unplug some refrigeration units. Certainly not all and not the big ones if you have a shorter shutdown, but maybe it makes sense to unplug milk coolers. Suppose you are in a school or a series of schools where you have a bunch of milk coolers and there's no milk sitting in them for 10 days between when the students leave before Christmas and come back after the new year. So maybe there's a chance to unplug those milk coolers. So think about kitchens, make sure ovens and other devices that heat, if they can be reasonably turned off, put a plan around it because most can safely be turned off. I have this next bullet here, work with the techs to turn off non-essential equipment, IT equipment. Again, this is a tough one. I say that, open with an open mind and just encouragingly that you need to just work with people and just talk about all the stuff that's out there and go for the easy stuff first and build over time. Mentioned this earlier about being creative, consolidate staff. Maybe you have an organization where people have the ability to work from home and maybe they're being asked to come into work between the holidays. And management has never considered, boy, if we just let people work from home between Christmas and New Year's, maybe there's a chance for us to keep our buildings closed and save a chunk of money. And so in having these conversations and doing this planning, I would say keep everything on the table. Come up with some creative ideas throughout some things that maybe you might anticipate that they would be shot down, but you'd be surprised. Many times if a CFO is involved and they see the opportunity to save money, they might jump all over the chance to do things a little different. So now the third step in the process. Third step is now we got to get out in the field and we got to start to prepare. We got to understand our buildings better. So you got to do your homework. So I would suggest any of the sites that you're hoping to shut down, you have got to walk those sites. You've got to begin to understand the temperatures that are occurring in there. And so you can begin to identify when it's abnormal. So if it is going through a series of startup and shutdown already daily, nightly, like where it's going into a setback, understand how hot or cold the building gets and how it changes. And then look at things like lighting conditions and the run times of stuff. You need to be able to document and have notes in every building and begin to learn what's normal so that as soon as it becomes abnormal, you can respond to it. Keep your eyes open for those technology opportunities, those printers, those computers, those things. It's easy to walk past those things and dismiss those. And I'm suggesting heighten your awareness. Keep your eyes open because you'll find some stuff. This third one is a big one, just a really, really big one in the list. And it's confirming the building automation system is functioning properly. One of the things I've observed in my travels is I found a surprising number of building automation systems not working the way they're supposed to. And this is universal all around the country. And it's just the way I think the industry is. I have no other logical explanation for it. But you can't assume when you make changes in your building automation system that they're necessarily going to do what you want to have done physically in the buildings. So you change a temperature set point, or you change an airflow, you change a schedule. What you need to do before you shut things down or be more aggressive, you have to confirm these devices are working properly. So I would suggest that you get out in the buildings and you work with your technicians. Maybe you have to do this in the evenings or the mornings or unique periods of time, but you have to test drive your buildings. That's the best way I can say it. Just like you go for a test drive in your car, you want to find out what the car is all about. You need to test drive your buildings and just make sure it's going to respond the way you expect. If you build that level of confidence in your buildings, you're going to feel way more comfortable shutting things down for 10 days over the holidays. Another huge source of failure that has created problems for people is they have damper failures. And if you're new to this and you're not sure what a damper is a little door that protects the heating and cooling coils from the outside. So it slams closed when the unit's off and it opens up when it's when the unit is trying to ventilate. So if the dampers on your air handling units, your unit ventilators, the devices, your heat pumps, the things that are running, if the dampers are not working correctly, this puts your buildings at risk. And so if you know you're dealing with old buildings and they haven't been commissioned and they need some attention, I would not look at those as likely candidates for a shutdown. The newer buildings, the buildings that you're more comfortable with, the buildings that have more horsepower that can recover faster, those buildings, check the dampers there. Make sure the dampers are working correctly. And once you're assured that they're working correctly, then you can feel comfortable in a hot or cold environment. So suppose you're in part of the country where it's going to get down to 0 during the holiday season and it's cold enough, it's like things could freeze. Well, you should feel comfortable that nothing is going to go wrong with your buildings as long as those dampers are closing. And so confirm that, do the homework, get out in the field and make sure that things are working correctly. Use Thanksgiving or the weekends leading up to a holiday as a pilot. If you're uh, going to identify 5 buildings, suppose you're an organization of 15 buildings, and this year, year number one, I just want to try to get 5 buildings to function different. Use the weekends and Thanksgiving as a pilot to test them. As I've said, confirm the building automation system is working the way it's supposed to, change the temperatures, set the building back in different ways, learn so that when you get to the actual holiday itself, you have the ability to capture more savings. And track the recovery. If you're setting the buildings back to a lower temperature, I gave the example earlier about maybe setting buildings back to 55 degrees. If you haven't done that before, try it on a weekend and then watch and measure the recovery come Sunday night or Monday morning. Does it take an hour? Does it take 2 hours? Does it take 3 hours? The physics and the math of it is if you can set your buildings back for an entire weekend at a lower temperature like 55 degrees, even though the recovery of the building might be much longer on a Monday morning, there's still way more energy savings in doing that rather than keeping a building, say, at 65 all weekend long. So use the weekends, use Thanksgiving as a practice run to test your buildings, find the limits, and also see if there's going to be complaints come Monday morning so you can get out in front of those and talk to the people and help them understand what you're trying to do in terms of learning about your buildings. The fourth step in this process now is now you've done all the prep. You've gone out in your buildings and you're ready to go. So now it's time to really put things in motion. So now you got to get everybody aligned and implement the plan. So now it's game time. I think the number one thing here is you have to support your team and lead with confidence. If you go into this confident that you're going to be successful, others will follow. If you're hesitant or you're squeamish, you don't exude confidence, people are going to feel that and they're going to be a little bit less enthusiastic about trying to do some of the things that you're promoting. So educate, encourage, make sure that you're building people up and giving them the information that they need in order to get involved. Explain what's happening and why it matters. So you might decide you're going to set a building back that's never been set back before, and people in the building catch wind of this. You probably want to talk to at least the leaders in that building, if not everybody in the building, explain why you're doing it and why it matters, the savings potential for doing this, and the fact that the building is the most expensive building in your organization. Bring them the facts and share with them what you know about the building, the things that you've learned, and why you've selected it to be the one that you're going to try to influence and change. So just simply give them reason and logic, and most people will respond to that. You might also share cost and energy estimates. Talk about, hey, we might be able to save, again, I'm just guessing a number here based on building size, but you might be able to save $5,000 over the course of 10 days around the holiday season. So do some estimates and calculations and share numerically those numbers with people, because most people say, wow, if we can save that much money and I'm not even here and it doesn't matter, then absolutely I'll support that activity. So try to do some cost calculations. And just putting a plug in too for a webinar that we have coming up in a couple weeks. Today, my emphasis is on the facility piece, trying to encourage these strategies for managing your facilities. In a couple weeks, we're going to focus on the financial piece. So this particular bullet here, I want to land on for the future webinar, and we talk about giving you more estimates on values for computers and for heating and cooling, just so you can begin to have a raised awareness yourself for the benefits of turning things off. But getting back to the list, so make sure you're training the facility techs. A theme that I've seen through the years is most facility techs are very dedicated to doing the best they can at their job, and they do it based on what they know. If you learn that your facilities are not being managed in the most effective, efficient way, it's probably because the people need training. They just need an understanding of what you're trying to achieve. And I want to circle back to this idea of moisture management. This is a huge area where facility techs in some cases don't have a clear understanding of the best way to manage moisture. So they do it to their best of their ability, but because they don't have a clear understanding, they do it wrong. Fill those gaps, train your staff so that they can do things the way you want, and ultimately your buildings will be safe. This next bullet, ask for people's help. You can't do it all yourself, so ask for help. Give people checklists. Suppose you're in a school situation where teachers are in their classrooms, and the teachers can very comfortably and easily power down their computer or turn off the devices that they have in their classroom. give them a list of the things that can be turned off, share it, and also engage the leadership people within the building. So in this case here, it might be a principal who can engage the teachers and say, hey, can you guys please do this as you leave? Build support and also try to utilize some of the authority that might exist just due to the chain of command. In going through this process, make sure that you thank people and show appreciation, genuine appreciation that they're doing things to help you out and help the organization out. So make that a common theme as you're talking with people. The big enchilada is typically rescheduling the building automation system. So make sure as you're building towards and executing over the holidays, you have to make that a priority. If this falls down your priority list and you say, I'll do it at the last minute, you're putting at risk your whole shutdown. So make sure when you're changing schedules or making changes to the building automation system, theoretically, it should be the easiest thing to do because you can do it from many times one location where you don't have to drive all around your organization. So put time, effort, and a strategy around rescheduling your building automation system. And if you need to undo that when the shutdown is done, make sure that you build time in for that. But change the building automation system. There's the picture here in the bottom left about reprogramming thermostats or clocks. That's, once again, where you're going to see the most savings. So make sure you put a lot of your effort into that. But then you got to get out there and audit the facilities. If you're asking people to do something different, you need to be out there to make sure that things are the way they're supposed to be. So don't sit idle, and definitely don't plan your own personal vacation around this time. This is the time that you need to be in your buildings and working in order to make sure that things are running smoothly. Also, confirm temperatures are reasonable. If you end up walking your buildings, you can identify the places that are particularly hot or cold or humid. So if you're in that cold environment and there's a high risk of freezing, make sure that you're walking many times around your buildings and keeping a close eye on them to make sure that you don't have a mishap with something freezing. And don't dismiss using the building automation system or your real-time data. If you have smart meters, you have meter data that flows into a system and you can see it remotely, work smarter and not harder by looking at the data remotely to see what's happening in your buildings. So check building temperatures or airflows or building conditions, CO2 levels, humidity levels. If you can check it remotely, do. It makes sense to do so. But don't just do that. Make sure you're getting out in the facilities as well in order to confirm that things are the way they're expected to be. And finally, as we begin to wrap up here, so now we're on step 5, the last step of this process. So now you've gone through the shutdown and now it's time to turn everything back on. So don't think your work is done just because you got everything turned off and managed. Your job is not done until everybody's back to work and people are comfortable again and we're back into a normal flow of the way we exist. So learn from your experiences as you do this. If there are missteps, if there are things that happen, take the time to understand what took place so you can learn from it and document it. Make sure you allow for a generous amount of recovery time on that Monday morning or that Wednesday morning after your building maybe has been turned off for 3 days or 5 days or 10 days. Make sure the building isn't cold because people will be a little grumpy if they walk into a cold building. So better to turn things on too early than too late. But also you'll get more confident over time when you do it the next time. You'll find a sweet spot for where you can get the right amount of recover and you can also maximize your savings. Be cautious of your buildings too. Like if you have VAV systems or old systems that don't recover well, or maybe your boilers are undersized in your buildings, keep all of those things in mind as you plan these things in order to make sure that this goes smoothly. Said it a couple of times, and I'm going to keep saying it just so it really sticks, is you need to be available. Murphy's Law loves building shutdowns. If you can predict some crazy wild thing is gonna happen, it's gonna happen over shutdown. So make sure that you anticipate that. I mentioned earlier about this idea of having contingency plans. Know Murphy is alive and well, and if this is the first time, for sure you're going to run into something you just won't expect. So learn from it, apologize if necessary, but then keep moving forward because it's all part of the process as you grow as an energy manager. And if one of these events happens, my suggestion is methodically investigate it and understand what took place. Why I think this is important is for this reason, is there are people when you plan these shutdowns that don't support them. people that will be resistors, and they look for reasons as to why we can't or shouldn't do this again in the future. And so we don't want to give them more ammunition, and we don't want them just to be able to tell the story if something goes wrong. Suppose you have computers that don't reboot correctly come Monday morning. It was unexpected. You need to go to the building, the location where these computers maybe didn't reboot correctly that created some frustration for the staff, and dig into the problem and find out what happened. Maybe they were the computers that you piloted and something unexpected, some update occurred and it caused the system to just not reboot properly and it created a snag. Don't just take others' words for it. You need to go check it out and do your homework, because sometimes during these shutdowns, things happen and people tell a negative story and it overwhelms all of the success of the shutdown, and you don't want that to happen. So methodically investigate, understand what the issue was, document it, if necessary, apologize for it. And then the next time you go through this process, just try to sidestep that landmine so it doesn't happen again. This last one here is try to quantify the results and share them even if they're anecdotal. Just due to the fact that you probably won't be able to talk specifically about the savings that may have occurred from your shutdown for weeks or even months after the shutdown, just because of the lag that occurs with utility bills, I would suggest shortly after the shutdown to talk about all the good things that you observed over the shutdown. Let's suppose, as an example, you had 30 buildings and you're able to shut 15 of them down. Well, let's communicate that out to people. Hey, everybody, over the shutdown, we had 15 of our buildings set back. I monitored them very carefully. The temperatures were great. We returned to school. There were no issues. It's an anecdotal story, but it helps people understand what you have done and what you're trying to achieve. And then maybe a month later, you follow up with, hey, remember how I told you we had this shutdown? Oh, just to let you know, we saved $100,000 over that time. So use anecdotal results, use the numbers when they come in, but tell the story of your success, because it will continue to help you build momentum. And finally, the last slide is this. Again, log those issues, document the findings. Because you're learning through this, create standard operating procedures for future shutdowns so that people know exactly what's expected of them. We've learned from mistakes in the past, and we're just getting better and better and better. And if people leave, retire, there's different employees in different spots of the building, everybody understands what's going on, and there can be a seamless execution of the shutdown. Again, use that utility data to verify the performance. Share these success stories, just the good stuff that's happening. And another pearl of wisdom that I'd offer from my years of doing this, it is really, really important that you provide feedback to your team. If you remember, almost an hour ago, I said, let's get people together. Let's have a conversation to plan for this shutdown. You need to get that same team of people together after the shutdown and share with them the good and the bad and the ugly from the shutdown. So you need to close the loop. You need to keep those people informed, because people will take things more seriously if they know that there's a commitment from you in order to see this be successful. So provide that feedback, close the loop, really, really important part of this process. And at the end of the day, it's about celebrating the win. Hopefully this can be executed well. You can be successful, save lots of money for your organization, and so celebrate it. Find the right way of doing that within your organization. And maybe you do it differently with different people. Maybe the people that have driven the success of your shutdown are your custodial team. And you just simply want to thank them for everything they did to help you execute your shutdown. Maybe you do something as simple as having a pizza party, or at one of their meetings when people are together, just celebrate them. Maybe highlight a few people, or reward the team in some way that makes sense, because those things will go a long way in terms of making the next shutdown even that much more successful. With that, that takes us to the end. I purposely wanted to leave us about 10 minutes left to give you the ability to ask any questions and tap into some of my experience. And I also wanted to throw up another poll question. I had mentioned earlier that the emphasis of this shutdown webinar was on the facilities side, just providing ideas for how to manage the facilities. We have another webinar coming up in a few weeks on the financial side. Certainly there's going to be some discussion of what we've had today, but I want to dig deeper into the math, into the billing part of the shutdown, and quantify for people what the savings benefit is. And so I have this poll up here, and if you'd like to be part of that, Daniela will make sure our team will make sure that you get an email so that you can put it on your calendar.
The other thing that I will say is in case, you're looking for other future webinars, you can always look on our website under our resources section. There's upcoming webinars, there's an upcoming webinar section and a recorded webinar section. So for those of you, just getting to know Energy Cap, just getting to know Tom, there's a lot of really great content on our site, and I'll post those links in just a moment. Tom, we didn't have any questions come in. Um,
Whoa.
but as you all had noticed, you do have the ability to raise your hand and speak. So if anyone does have any questions or comments or maybe experiences that relate to what Tom talked about, we'd love to hear from you. So do not be shy. Amazing. Fred, let's see what you got to say. You are welcome to speak. You just need to unmute your mic. Yes, no, maybe so.
You
There we are.
There we
hear
are.
me?
Yes.
All right, so we don't have any, our electrical systems aren't on any BMS to control. Everything's pretty much manual with that. My question is that for shutting down the building, shutting down computers and that type of thing, should we install like a toggle switch in the front of the classroom? Basic switch to shut down the electrical outlets that the computers are running on, or how should we handle that? Are we going to shut the power strips off?
Yeah, what I would say is there's not a one size fits all or just an answer that I would say definitively this is the best way. What I feel like many organizations that I've worked with through time, the solution they like the best is power strips, where it seems as though the IT department is typically comfortable with computers being plugged into a power strip. And if there's a printer or other, I'll call it satellite devices there, that they can be turned off with the power strip, and that teacher or that occupant can turn it off, walk away, even nightly, let alone if it's over a long weekend or a shutdown period of time, and then power it up. And I think part of using those is just making people understand that, yes, your computer might take a minute or two extra to start up on that Monday morning, but just expect it. Turn your computer on, go get a cup of coffee, come back, your computer will be like it always is, all ready to go for work. Fred, is that the answer to your question? Is that what you were kind of thinking?
Yeah, I mean, the issue I'm going to have with that is I'm not going to, with the teachers, they're all busy with their schedules and all. They're not going to, it's going to have to be the custodial staff that's taking care of that.
Yeah.
So,
Fred, one of the things I caution you with that, again, a lot of the work I've done has been in schools. Custodians become resentful of trying to take care of the teachers. And I don't know how to frame it any other way and more gently than that, is they think it's reasonable if the teachers are if devices need to be turned off, the teacher should be responsible. So this might be a conversation that needs to happen with principals, the custodial staff, the teaching staff. I have coordinated personally myself many conversations where I get a building together. So all 30 teachers and the 5 custodians and the principals and the secretaries and everybody comes together to talk about it. And usually if everybody's in the same room and kind of agrees to the plan, it goes off without a hitch. So that's my solution, is bring people together, help everybody understand what you're trying to achieve, and then most people will be okay with it. It works much better than just saying, hey, you do this, custodian, on behalf of the teachers. It'll create some animosity with your custodial staff typically.
Okay. All right, try and get everybody on board with that.
Yeah, Brett, it's a tough road to hoe. I'm not suggesting it's easy, but that's part of the commitment that I think you need to make in order to really reap the benefits.
Yeah, well, I'll definitely give it a shot at the next faculty meeting. See how we can work it. Okay.
Yeah, I'll tell you this too, just my experience. Doing it in an elementary school is easy. Doing it in a middle school is a little bit harder, and doing it at a high school is the hardest road to hoe. And I am a former high school teacher, so I'm kind of throwing myself underneath the bus. but many times the high school teachers put their priority of educating the kids higher than anything, including energy conservation. So just
Yeah.
if you're going to use this as a strategy, just know that when you walk into that high school, it's going to be your most difficult meeting.
Okay. That and a Kevlar vest.
Yeah, well, you got to do what you got to do.
And hey,
Thanks. Thanks.
we would love to hear how it goes. I hope it goes well,
Yeah.
but if it doesn't, you can email Tom and let him know your ideas didn't work. Think of something else.
Happy
Um,
to get feedback. Always happy to get feedback.
yeah. Thanks, Fred, for chiming in, and hopefully we see you back at part 2.
Yeah,
Yeah,
looking
thank
forward
you.
to it.
Awesome. Travis mentioned 60% of people buying in is better than 0. So
Amen.
make it as easy as possible. Yep, totally.
Yep. And you have to get to 60 before you get to 70. One of the things that I consider this idea, this slow drip of water, where the water just drips and eventually it breaks the thing down, whatever it's falling on over time. That's good energy management programs are that way. You just kind of break people down over time. You show them that it's possible. You win over 60% of the people, and then eventually it's 65 and 70. So this does take time, but ultimately to get the culture changed and move your organization to the best place possible, you just have to commit to the long game and just keep working the problems, and typically it gets better over time.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and you mentioned something about like the best energy management programs are the ones that are like the water dripping, very much the hypothetical water dripping, right? Because really
Yes.
good energy programs are the ones that don't have any leaks.
Yes, it's more the figurative than the literal.
Right.
Yes.
Right. And I think I said literally instead of figuratively, but I think you all know what I meant.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I think we're wrapping up. I don't see any other hands raised or questions that came in through the Q&A. So, follow Tom on LinkedIn. He's a wonderful, wonderful resource, as you guys know. We do also have an online community. I know a handful of you folks are already on there, but it's called Eco Champions, and you can get to it if you go to our website in the top right corner. There's a little button called Eco Champions. And it's just a place to kind of keep these conversations going. We often host what we call water cooler talks as well, where we just get a handful of people into a virtual room and talk about things that are hot topics in y'all's life. So if you want to stay connected digitally to this crew that's on the call, feel free to join that. And we hope to see you, like I said, next on the next webinar.
Thanks everybody for joining today. Have a great day.
Have a good
Be
one.
safe.
Bye.
Bye.